It was the kind of day you wish would just end. The kind where you pray for a blackout or even a mild earthquake just to shake things up. Instead, I got stuck in a supply room with the one man I swore I would never breathe the same air with longer than 10 minutes. Fate clearly has a cruel sense of humor. The door slammed shut behind us with a metallic clang. And when I twisted the knob, it didn't budge. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, rattling the handle like a man possessed. Behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of his laughter, low, amused, and infuriatingly charming. "Of course it would be you," he said, his voice soaked in mockery. If I ever wondered what hell felt like, I think I just found out. I spun around, ready with a comeback, but my words tangled in my throat the moment our eyes locked. Ethan Hayes, my so-called rival, leaned casually against the shelves stacked with paper reams. His tie loosened, hair a glorious mess from what must have been a long day. His smirk was lethal, the kind that could ruin Livesor in this case. Ruin my composure. "Don't flatter yourself," I shot back, forcing my tone to sound bored. "Being stuck here with you is torture for both of us." "Good," he said, crossing his arms, his muscles flexing just enough to make me glance twice before cursing myself. "At least we agree on something." The room was barely larger than a walk-in closet. Every movement, every shift of breath, brought us closer. The air felt heavier by the second, filled with something neither of us wanted to name. The rivalry between us wasn't new. At our Manhattan advertising firm, Ethan and I had been butting heads for over a year, competing for the same clients, the same recognition, sometimes even the same damn seat in the conference room. He was brilliant, cocky, and infuriatingly magnetic. I was determined, sharp, and more stubborn than was probably healthy. Put us together, and sparks flew, but the kind that usually burned bridges. Until now, I pressed my back against the wall, trying to create distance in a room that refused to give us any. My heart was drumming against my ribs in a way I couldn't explain. Rivalry, I told myself. Hatred, that's all it was. But the way Ethan's gaze lingered on me told a different story. By the 15-minute mark, the jokes had stopped. By the 30-minute mark, the silence was deafening. The longer we stood there, the more my defenses began to crack. I hated how easily he could read me, how he seemed to see past the armor I'd built up just to survive this industry. "So," he finally said, his voice softer now, "why do you hate me so much?" The question landed like a sucker punch. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I'd been preparing insults, sarcastic retorts, but not this. Not honesty. "Because I started, then shook my head. "You're everything I can't stand. You walk into a room and people notice. You don't even have to try. You're effortless." For a moment, I thought I saw his smirk falter. He looked at me differently, as if the wall between us had a crack. "You think it's effortless," he said. "You have no idea." His voice was steady, but there was something underneath, something raw. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted the door to open anymore. The silence that followed his words wasn't empty. It was charged, heavy, humming like an exposed wire. I stared at Ethan, really stared, and for the first time in months I noticed the exhaustion behind his sharpness. His eyes gray, stormy, held shadows I'd never bothered to look for. Effortless. That's what I'd called him. But looking at him now, trapped in this shoebox of a room, I wondered if I had been wrong all along. "You think I don't work for it?" he asked, almost whispering. He let out a humorless laugh. "You don't know how many nights I go home and feel like I'm one bad pitch away from losing everything." I frowned. "You lose everything. You're golden boy, Hayes. The clients love you. Management loves you. And you hate me for it, he said simply. The bluntness cut through me sharper than any of his usual jabs. I should have fired back, made a joke, brushed it off, but instead, I found myself asking the question I never thought I'd care about. Why do you care what I think? Ethan's gaze lingered on me, long enough to make me uncomfortable, long enough to make me feel like I was being peeled open. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pushed off the shelf and took a single step closer. The room shrank even more. Maybe because you're the only one who doesn't buy the act, he said finally. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual arrogance. Everyone else, they see charm. They see confidence. You see straight through it. You see me. My chest tightened, and I hated it. I hated how his words cracked something inside me I didn't want cracked. I turned away, pretending to study the stack of copier paper on the shelf. But my ears burned. Don't romanticize this, I muttered. We're still enemies. He chuckled softly. If you say so. The hours stretched. We sat on the floor at one point, back to back because the space was too small to do anything else. His warmth seeped into me through the thin barrier of our shirts, and every accidental brush of his arm sent my pulse racing in a way I couldn't explain. I told myself it was the claustrophobia, the lack of oxygen, anything but him. But then he started talking. Not trash talk, not banter, real talk. About growing up in Ohio with a single mom who worked 2 jobs. About the scholarship that got him to NYU. How he hustled through internships just to get a foot in the door. His voice softened as he described the pressure of being the guy who made it out. I found myself listening. Really listening. And against every defense I had, I shared a little too. I told him about my dad. The Wall Street executive who measured love in achievements, who only spoke in numbers and expectations. I told him how exhausting it was to never be enough, no matter how hard I worked. When I finished, there was a pause. Then Ethan said quietly, maybe we're not so different, after all. I almost laughed at the absurdity, but instead, I whispered, maybe. By the time the clock on my phone glowed past midnight, the tension in the room had shifted. It wasn't rivalry anymore. It wasn't even annoyance. It was something warmer, heavier, terrifying in its unfamiliarity. I caught him watching me again, his eyes tracing my face like he was memorizing it. What? I asked, more defensive than I meant. Nothing, he said, though his lips curved in the faintest smile. Just, you're not as insufferable as I thought. High praise. I deadpanned, but my mouth betrayed me with the hint of a smile. Something about the moment felt dangerous, like stepping too close to the edge of a cliff. My instinct screamed to pull back, to throw up the walls again. But the air between us was magnetic, and my body didn't listen. He leaned in, just slightly, and I swear the room tilted. My breath caught, and then, a loud clank at the door. The sound of keys fumbling. We both jerked back just as the janitor swung the door open, blinking at us like he'd walked in on something scandalous. Which, to be fair, he nearly had. You boys stuck? He asked, his voice gruff but amused. Ethan stood quickly, offering a hand to me. I hesitated, then took it. His grip was strong, steady, grounding. For a second too long, neither of us let go. Yeah, Ethan said smoothly. Stuck. But, we're good now. The janitor nodded, unconvinced, and wandered off. We stepped out of the cramped room into the vast, empty office, the city lights glittering beyond the glass walls. Freedom. Space. And yet, I missed the closeness immediately. We didn't talk about what almost happened. We packed up, grabbed our coats, and walked out of the building side by side like nothing had changed. Except everything had. The night air was sharp against my skin. I shoved my hands into my pockets, fighting the urge to say something, anything to break the silence. Ethan beat me to it. "Drinks?" he asked casually, though his voice carried an undercurrent I couldn't quite name. I stared at him. "You and me. At a bar." "Why not?" he said, smirking again, though softer this time. "Unless you're afraid." "Of what?" He stepped closer, his shoulder brushing mine, and whispered, "Of finding out how much you don't hate me." My heart stuttered. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But instead, I heard myself mutter, "One drink." His grin was devastating. "One's all I need." The bar was nearly empty. A dimly lit dive tucked between a laundromat and a tattoo shop. We sat in a booth near the back. 2 beers between us. The weight of the night pressing in. At first, it was safe topics. Work. Clients. The ridiculousness of corporate buzzwords. But soon the conversation deepened, weaving between past wounds and future fears, laughter and quiet confessions. And then there was a pause, a stretch of silence heavy enough to drown in. Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table, eyes locked on mine. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Do you actually hate me?" The question hung between us like a live wire. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I thought I did. "And now?" I exhaled slowly, the truth clawing its way out despite my resistance. "Now, I don't know what the hell I feel." His hand slid across the table, slow, deliberate, until his fingers brushed mine. A spark shot through me, sharp and undeniable. "Then let me help you figure it out," he murmured. And God help me, I didn't pull away. The night unraveled in ways I hadn't expected, hadn't prepared for. Touches that lingered too long. Glances that said more than words. The taste of his beer still on his lips when he finally kissed me. Soft at first, then hungrier as the dam broke. It was reckless. It was insane. It was everything I had sworn I would never allow. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself want. The next morning, reality hit like a cold shower. We were still rivals. Still colleagues. Still trapped in the same cutthroat firm where any hint of vulnerability could be weaponized. And yet, as Ethan handed me a coffee with that infuriatingly perfect smile, I knew one thing for certain. Something had shifted. And there was no going back. The first rule of survival in corporate America. Pretend nothing happened. That was the mantra I repeated to myself as I walked into the office Monday morning. Coffee in hand. A carefully neutral expression plastered across my face. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Colleagues buzzed around the bullpen. And for one blissful second, I believed I could carry on like normal. Then Ethan walked in. He was all sharp lines and confidence as always. Striding through the office with a folder tucked under his arm and that maddening grin tugging at the corner of his lips. Nobody else noticed. But I did. Because when his gaze flickered to me, just for half a second, it lingered. And my chest betrayed me with that same damn thud I'd been trying to ignore all weekend. I ducked my head, burying myself in emails. But no amount of unread messages could erase the memory of Friday night, the cramped supply room. The bar afterward. The taste of him. God. The taste of him. I wasn't supposed to want this. I wasn't supposed to want him. Morning. Partner. The voice was right above me. I looked up, startled, to find Ethan leaning against my desk. His tie loose. His eyes lit with mischief. "Don't call me that," I hissed. "What? Morning. Or partner?" I shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. He only smirked wider, It was infuriating. It was reckless. And yet, beneath the irritation, there was an ache in my chest that only grew when he pushed off my desk and sauntered away, leaving me drowning in the scent of his cologne. By Wednesday, I knew I was in trouble. We'd been thrown onto the same pitch team again. A massive account, the kind that could make or break careers. Our boss, oblivious to the quiet war raging between us, declared we were the dream duo. If only she knew. We met in late-night sessions, holed up in glass conference rooms with whiteboards covered in scribbles and half-empty coffee cups littering the table. On the surface, we argued like always debating copy lines, tearing apart each other's slides. But beneath the sparring was something else. Current I couldn't ignore. Every time his hand brushed mine reaching for a marker, my breath caught. Every time his voice dipped low, coaxing instead of mocking, my skin prickled. And when I caught him looking at Miralai looking like I was more than just a rival, my world tilted. One night, around midnight, the office long deserted. I snapped. "This isn't working." Ethan froze, marker still in hand. "What isn't?" "This." I gestured wildly between us. The boards. The empty space. "You." "Me." Pretending like nothing's going on. His jaw tightened. He set the marker down slowly, like a man defusing a bomb. "So stop pretending." My heart hammered. "It's not that simple." "It is," he said, stepping closer. His eyes burned into mine, unflinching. "You want me. I want you. Why keep lying?" I hated him for being right. I hated myself for the way my body leaned toward his without permission. And when his lips finally crashed into mine, hard and desperate, I didn't pull away. It became our dangerous secret. Stolen moments in stairwells. Lingering touches in empty conference rooms. His hand brushing mine beneath the table during client meetings when nobody was looking. Every encounter was a risk, and maybe that was why it felt so intoxicating. But the higher the stakes, the sharper the blade. Because the truth was, we weren't equals. We were competitors. Both of us wanted the account. Both of us wanted recognition. And no matter how much heat burned between us, ambition doesn't vanish overnight. That fact hit hard 2 weeks later, when our boss announced the client would only choose one lead. One of us would walk away with the win. The other would be left behind. The fallout began in whispers. I overheard colleagues speculating in the break room. "Hayes is the obvious choice. He's got the charisma." Others countered. "No, is my name sharp, relentless, unshakable?" It was supposed to be business as usual. But suddenly, every look Ethan and I shared felt like a question. Every smile carried the weight of betrayal waiting to happen. And it terrified me. One night, I found him in the office lounge, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, nursing a scotch like the world was ending. "You're quiet," I said, sinking into the chair opposite him. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Unusual, isn't it?" I waited. Finally, he exhaled and muttered, "What happens when they pick one of us?" I stared at him, throat tight. "We deal with it." "And if it's me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I didn't have an answer. He gave a bitter laugh. "That's what I thought." The silence between us was brutal. For the first time, I realized what this thing between us could cost. Not just pride. Not just careers. Maybe everything. The pitch day arrived like a storm. Suits. Polished decks. Fake smiles plastered on every executive's face. Ethan and I stood side by side at the head of the table, presenting as a seamless team while underneath, my stomach churned. We nailed it. Every slide. Every line, every laugh from the clients felt like a victory. But when it ended, when the applause faded, the truth settled in. Soon, only one of us would stand in the spotlight. And as I looked at Ethan, his grin dazzling, his eyes burning with the same fear I felt, I wondered if we'd survive it. That night, couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the pitch, every glance, every smile, every touch we'd stolen in the shadows. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Come over. 2 words. Dangerous. Reckless. Irresistible. I should have said no. I should have let the distance protect us. But instead, I found myself standing outside his door 20 minutes later, heart pounding. He pulled me in before I could say a word. The kiss was raw, desperate, a storm breaking loose. Clothes fell away, barriers shattered, and for hours we drowned in each other like the world outside didn't exist. When dawn broke, pale light spilling through his blinds, reality crashed back. Because love, if that's what this was, doesn't erase ambition. And soon, one of us would have to lose. The email arrived on a Thursday morning. One short, sterile paragraph from upper management. After careful consideration, the client has chosen Ethan Hayes as the lead on the account. Effective immediately. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring around the edges. My throat closed. My hands shook. It wasn't like I hadn't prepared myself for this outcome. Ethan was charming, magnetic, impossible to ignore. But knowing it and seeing it in writing were 2 different things. The office buzzed around me, colleagues offering congratulations, backslaps, the clinking of coffee mugs in Ethan's honor. He stood in the middle of it all, smiling, thanking people, gracious as ever. He played the part so well that I wanted to scream. And then looked at me. Just a glance, quick and searching, like he was silently asking if I was okay. I wasn't. I packed my bag and walked out before he could say a word. That night, I ignored his calls. The next morning, I ignored his texts. By the weekend, he showed up at my apartment. I opened the door just enough to glare at him. What do you want? To talk, he said, his voice tight. Please. There's nothing to talk about. Don't do that. His hand braced against the doorframe. Don't shut me out. My laugh was sharp, bitter. You got what you wanted, Ethan. Congrats. Lead on the biggest account of the year. You win. This isn't a game. Isn't it? My voice cracked despite myself. Because it feels like I just lost everything. He flinched like I'd hit him. For a second, I thought he'd fight back, throw the same knives I'd just thrown. Instead, he whispered, You didn't lose me. The words hung in the air, fragile, dangerous. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the bitterness was louder. Go home, Ethan. The door shut between us with a hollow finality. The weeks that followed were brutal. At work, I watched him flourish, watched him charm the clients and bask in the praise. Kept my head down, forcing myself to focus on smaller projects, pretending I didn't feel the empty ache every time our eyes met across the conference room. Outside of work, I drowned in loneliness. Every corner of the city reminded me of him, the bar where we'd laughed until 2 a.m., the subway station where our hands had brushed, even the stupid supply room where it all began. And the worst part, I missed him. I missed his sarcasm, his warmth, the way he looked at me like I was more than the sum of my achievements. But pride chained me. Couldn't go back. Not when it felt like I'd been left behind. It all came to a head one Friday night. The firm threw a celebration party for the account win. A rooftop affair overlooking the Manhattan skyline. I almost didn't go. But some masochistic part of me wanted to see him. Wanted to prove I could stand there in the same space and not crumble. The rooftop glittered with fairy lights. Champagne glasses clinking. Jazz humming softly from the speakers. Ethan was at the center of it all. Radiant in a dark suit. Colleagues orbiting him like planets around the sun. I tried to avoid him. I really did. I clung to conversations with coworkers. Sipped my drink too fast. Stared at the skyline like it held answers. But eventually, he found me. "Hey," he said quietly, stepping close. Too close. I stiffened. "Congratulations." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend you don't care." His voice was low, meant only for me. "I know you do." Anger flared hot in my chest. "Of course I care, Ethan. I cared so much it destroyed me. And you," my voice broke. "You got everything. And I got nothing." He reached for me, his hand brushing my wrist. "That's not true. You have me." I pulled back like his touch burned. "Do I?" The hurt that flickered across his face gutted me. He opened his mouth. But I didn't let him speak. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered. Then I walked away, leaving him standing there under the fairy lights. His perfect smile finally cracked. The next week was a blur. We didn't speak. At work, we became strangers again, polite, distant, pretending we'd never been anything else. The silence between us was louder than any fight could have been. But at night, when the city quieted, the loneliness hit hardest. I lay awake replaying every memory, every kiss, every laugh, torturing myself with what I'd thrown away. I told myself it was for the best, that letting him go was survival. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd fallen in love with Ethan Hayes, and I'd just broken my own heart. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday. I was leaving the office late, my umbrella useless against the downpour, when I saw him across the street. He was standing there in the rain, soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead. And he was looking at me like I was the only person in the world. For a moment, I froze. Then he crossed the street, cars honking as he darted through traffic, until he was in front of me, rain dripping down his face. "You can keep ignoring me," he said, voice rough, "but I'm not giving up." My chest ached. "Ethan, no. Listen." His eyes burned into mine, fierce and unyielding. "I didn't want the account if it meant losing you. None of this," he gestured wildly at the office building behind us, "means anything without you." The rain pounded between us, the city roaring around us. And for the first time in weeks, the walls inside me cracked. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to step into his arms and never look back. But trust is a fragile thing. And mine was still broken. So I whispered, "Prove it." His jaw tightened, determination flashing in his eyes. "I will." When I told him to prove it, I didn't expect anything. People make promises in the rain all the time, and most of them wash away with the storm. I thought he'd show up the next day with the same smirk, the same cocky charm, and I'd be reminded why I never should have trusted him in the first place. But then he surprised me. It started small. An extra coffee left on my desk in the morning. No note, just the kind I always ordered. My favorite pen, one I'd lost weeks ago, suddenly appeared on my keyboard, polished and waiting. Little things, quiet things. Then came the bigger gestures. He volunteered to take the late-night client calls so I wouldn't have to. He redirected praise in meetings, going out of his way to highlight my work. He even shut down a partner who tried to credit him for something I'd written. Each move chipped at the armor I'd built, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop noticing, couldn't stop feeling. But the real shift came on a Thursday evening. I was buried in revisions, the office nearly empty, when I felt his presence behind me. He didn't say anything at first, just set something on my desk. A sketchbook. I blinked at it. What is this? Open it. Inside were rough pencil drawings. Of me. At first, I thought my brain was playing tricks, the lines too familiar, the expressions too intimate. Me hunched over a laptop. Me laughing mid-conversation. Me sipping coffee with that glazed 7A. Look. Dozens of moments. All captured like he'd been memorizing me for months. My throat tightened. You drew these? He shrugged, suddenly shy in a way I'd never seen before. You said I was effortless. But I wanted you to know. I see you. Every detail. Every moment. Nothing about you is effortless to me. Couldn't breathe. The walls I'd held up for weeks trembled. Why are you doing this? I whispered. His voice was steady, but his eyes were raw. Because I love you. The words hit like a thunderclap. For a long moment, all I could do was stare, my chest heaving, my heart sprinting. I'd imagined hearing those words, craved them in the darkest nights. But now that they were here, I didn't know what to do with them. I don't deserve you, I finally muttered. He stepped closer, shaking his head. No, you deserve more than anyone's ever given you. And I want to be the one who gives it. Something broke open inside me. Something I'd been holding shut for far too long. And before I could stop myself, I whispered back, I love you too. The kiss that followed wasn't desperate like before. It wasn't reckless or stolen. It was slow, deliberate, like a promise. And for the first time since this whole twisted, messy thing began, felt right. Of course, love doesn't erase reality overnight. The office was still a battlefield. We still had egos, deadlines, bosses, and the ever-watchful eyes of colleagues who would eat a scandal alive. But everything was different. We weren't hiding out of shame anymore. We were protecting something fragile, something worth keeping safe. There were still stolen moment smiles across a crowded conference room. Hands brushing under the table. Midnight pizza runs after long shifts. But there was also honesty now. Vulnerability. Nights spent in his apartment talking until dawn. Laughter spilling louder than the city outside. Confessions whispered against the quiet. And slowly, I realized something. This wasn't the story of rivals turned lovers. This was the story of two men who'd been fighting their whole lives for recognition, for survival, for love, and had finally found someone worth fighting with. The final test came months later, when the firm announced a new partnership, another massive account, even bigger than the last. Everyone expected the same Hunger Games, the same cutthroat competition. Ethan and I exchanged a look across the table. This time, we stood side by side. When the client asked who would lead, Ethan's voice was clear. We will. Together. A murmur swept the room. Shock. Confusion. Maybe even disapproval. But then, slowly, heads nodded. Because when we spoke, when we presented as a team, it was undeniable. We weren't rivals anymore. We were unstoppable together. That night, back in the tiny supply room where it all began, Ethan leaned against the shelves and smirked. Funny, isn't it? If that door hadn't jammed, none of this would have happened. I laughed, shaking my head. We would have found our way here anyway. Confident. I stepped closer, my hand sliding against his. No, just certain. He pulled me in, his lips brushing mine, soft and familiar. Good, because I'm never letting you go. And for once, I didn't argue. The city outside pulsed with life, endless and chaotic. The world spun on with its noise and deadlines and competition. But in that small room, in his arms, everything was quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Happily ever after isn't about fireworks every day. It's about the quiet mornings. The coffee he makes before I'm even awake. The way he presses a kiss to my temple while I'm still tangled in sleep. It's the sound of him humming off-key while shaving. The little post-it notes he leaves in my laptop bag, just to make me roll my eyes and smile. It's also about the fights. Because we still fight. We still argue over ideas. Over deadlines. Over who gets the last slice of pizza. But now, the fights end differently. With apologies. With laughter. With the knowledge that neither of us is going anywhere. Months slipped into seasons. The firm adjusted quickly to our partnership. Some skeptics. Some quiet gossip. But mostly admiration when the results came in. We won accounts. Built campaigns that turned heads. And proved what we'd always known deep down. Together. We were stronger than either of us could have been alone. But the victories at work were nothing compared to the victories outside it. The first time Ethan took me home to Ohio, I was terrified. Meeting his mom felt more nerve-wracking than any client pitch. She opened the door with warm eyes and flour on her hands, pulling me into a hug before I could even introduce myself. "You're the one," she whispered, loud enough for Ethan to groan. Over dinner, she told stories of him as a boy, headstrong, stubborn, endlessly curious. He blushed, protesting, while I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. Later that night, when we lay in his childhood bedroom, posters still clinging to the walls, I whispered, "She's right. You know, you're the one." He kissed me softly, his eyes shining. "So are you." Not everything was easy. When I finally brought Ethan to meet my father, the air was cold, the tension sharp. My father measured people the way he measured stock's value. Potential. Risk. He looked at Ethan with skepticism, his questions laced with judgment. But Ethan never faltered. He answered calmly, respectfully, never shrinking, never attacking. Later, when my father pulled me aside and muttered, "He's not what I imagined for you," I straightened my shoulders and said, "He's exactly what I need." It was the first time I stood my ground. The first time I realized love had given me courage I didn't know I had. Seasons changed again. Summer melted into crisp autumn. Our lives became a rhythm work. Late-night walks through the city. Weekends escaping to the coast. Curled up with books and laughter. One night, on a rooftop overlooking Manhattan, Ethan pulled something from his pocket. A ring. Simple. Silver. Understated. My breath caught. "Ethan, relax." He laughed. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Yet." He slipped it onto my finger. "This is just, promise, that I'm in this, for good." I stared at the ring, then at him, my chest aching in the best way. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe," he said, pulling me into his arms. "But I'm yours." And under the city lights, I believed him. Love doesn't erase the scars of the past. I still have nights where the weight of expectations crushes me, where my father's voice echoes in my head. Ethan still wrestles with the pressure of living up to everyone's idea of perfection. But now, we carry it together. When I wake from nightmares, he's there, holding me until my breathing slows. When the stress eats at him, I remind him that he doesn't have to be effortless, not with me. We aren't perfect, but we're real. And real is better than perfect. Sometimes, when we pass that old supply room at work, we glance at each other and laugh. Nobody else knows what that room holds for us, the claustrophobic air, the sharp banter, the spark that lit a fire we couldn't put out. It's our secret beginning. The place where enemies became something else entirely. The place where, against all odds, I found the person who sees Menet the mask. Not the rival. Not the facade. Just me. And every day since, he's been proving what he promised in the rain. That he's not going anywhere. So maybe fate doesn't have a cruel sense of humor after all. Maybe fate knew exactly what it was doing when it jammed that door shut. Because if love can grow in a cramped supply closet, can survive anything, and ours will, always. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.